You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wood.
And I'm Jennifer Connor from Equestrian Businesswomen, and you're listening to Equestrian B2B, the podcast that brings together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and equestrians for conversations about how they build and sustain a successful business. On today's show, we speak with Haley Ruffner and Shayla Smith about their sales roles, working in the agriculture industry, and how they develop relationships.
Haley Ruffner is a summa cum laude graduate of Alfred University with an English degree and equine business management minor. She rode on the Western and Huntsy IHSA teams. She interned with Tim McQuay, the National Reining Horse Association's first ever $2 million rider. She republished 3 out-of-copyright books with original introductions while in college, worked as a publishing intern, and was a teaching assistant for both publishing and riding classes. In addition, she wrote 4 years' worth of weekly blogs detailing her collegiate riding experience on horsenation.com. After graduating, Haley traveled to Colorado to work as a wrangler on horseback-guided elk hunts, taking care of the horses in the backcountry and helping to pack out elk in the Culebra mountain range. While working remotely as an editor for 2 years, she also worked at a hay farm and spent time with horse trainers as a server and barista, as a contractor's assistant, and at a greenhouse and farmer's market. Haley now works as a sales broker for Edenbrook and has become a market expert on horse hay and shavings. She writes both educational and anecdotal articles for the Edenbrook blog, and when not at her desk, you can find her visiting local farmers, on cattle drives, or out riding somewhere. Haley lives in Alamosa, Colorado.
Shayla Smith grew up on a ranch in New Mexico, rodeoing and riding cutting horses. She is a 4-time state high school champion cutter, the 2001 state champion breakaway roper, and 2002 national high school champion cutter. Shayla has won jackpots in breakaway, a finalist in multiple NCHA events, and has qualified for the American semifinals several times. She has worked for several of the top cutting horse trainers and is currently training rope horses. Shayla started flying helicopters in 2009. She has flown tours around Mount Rushmore and in the Grand Canyon. In 2014, Shayla started flying medevac for a large company out of New Mexico and then transferred with the same company to Uvalde, Texas. In 2018, she flew the news helicopter out of Denver, Colorado, and then in 2020, she flew medevac out of Farmington, New Mexico. Shayla lives in Stephenville, Texas, with her 2 dogs, 4 horses, and 2 kids. Her current role is a sales broker at Edenbrook. Join us at the 2023 Saratoga Women in Business Spectacular on July 11th through 16th at White Hollow Farm in Stillwater, New York. With this year's theme of wellness, prosperity, and wisdom, you can hear from speakers, listen to panels, participate in activities, and network at our cocktail party. Mark your calendar to save the dates now and stay tuned to hear more from equestrian businesswomen about the schedule and exciting news to come.
Shayla and Haley, we're really happy to have you here today to learn more about your extensive backgrounds and really interesting things that you've done kind of leading up to the career that you have now. And so we're excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This is such an honor.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I actually am kind of excited to hear your opinions about your jobs because you work for the same company. And you're in an industry that is not typically something women would be in. So I want to see if you guys have the same kind of views or if they're different a little bit. So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So Shayla, we're going to start with you. And I just want to know, with working at Edenbrook, what is the biggest challenge you face as a hay sales broker?
Being a constant pest. Having to call people over and over and not just accepting no is pretty challenging to me. I've actually had to train myself to and talk myself up before I make the call again. Like, it's okay. This is what you're supposed to do. Just be nice and they'll be receptive eventually, and at first, I just would be like, no, they said no. Okay. I'm not going to call them back. But, now I'm getting to where I can actually, I don't mind. I'm like, I'm just going to pester them, once a week. If it's like a big deal or, every day, if I need to find out information and they're not getting it to me. So I'm becoming a pest, which is kind of, how you be successful in the sales industry.
Yeah, you have to kind of ask for what you want for, which is,
Uh-huh.
I am also being in sales, and I think that that's a really big struggle, is learning to be able to speak up and over ask for things for the same
Yeah.
people. And Haley, what's the biggest challenge that you face as a hay sales broker at Aidenbrook?
My answer is going to be much in the same vein as Shayla's. I would say my biggest challenge, especially in the beginning, was just the sheer volume of cold calls that I was making. Where you have to make a call and you know that they're going to be awkward and uncomfortable in the beginning, but you have to get on the phone and do it anyway. And so that was such a challenge, just in terms of, feeling like a pest, thinking I didn't yet have the market knowledge that I needed to really provide a good service for people. And so I think, learning how to just push through the cold calls, accept that they're going to have to be awkward before they can be good. And coming to the understanding also that, no, I am providing a really good and valuable service for both my farmers and my customers, and that eventually they're going to learn that they do want to talk to me. But then in the meantime, I am going to feel like a pest, and I am going to feel not confident or awkward, just making those phone calls and just banging them out.
And I think it's really helpful when you believe in the products that you're selling, right? Both of you have an extensive equine background. So, I think that's great. What's one piece of advice that you can give to someone that's getting into the sales role? Haley, let's start with you.
I would say my biggest piece of advice, having not come from a sales background at all, is to, especially in the beginning, approach it sort of as a mental exercise rather than basing your success or your perception of your own success on your actual performance and deals closed. So, especially in the beginning, I would make it my goal to be told no as many times as possible in a day, just because that meant that I was making the connections that I need to make, and that would eventually lead me to a yes. So when I first started out, I was nervous that something bad was going to happen, or that I was going to be rejected on a phone call, and that I perceived as a bad thing or as a failure on my part. And then I learned to sort of shift my mental viewpoint on that to, awkward things are going to happen. I'm going to have uncomfortable phone calls. But that's part of growth. That's leading me closer to getting a yes from someone.
I think that could apply to kind of anyone in business, really, of being persistent and kind of going for, like you said, going for the yes, no matter if it's hard in the beginning. And I like that you're able to, still say, okay, this isn't comfortable for me, but I'm going to keep pushing. Because I think a lot of people probably have the same situation, even if they're starting a business, it may not be cold calling, but it is still trying to reach out to people and be able to share what you do and why your product is so good. So yeah, I like that.
And so I was listening to a podcast recently, and this woman was talking about, how to learn to get uncomfortable. And her suggestion was to start out when you're like at a restaurant and not order off the menu, like order something or change your meal. Like it doesn't have to be exactly what's on the menu. So ask for something that's not on the menu, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable for you, but that'll get you started in being able to ask for things that, you're a little uncomfortable asking for. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tip to kind of break the ice, And
because you're in the situation where you're the customer and people are trying to make you happy. So if you can ask for something that makes you uncomfortable, then at least they're going to try.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. Shayla, what's one piece of advice that you can give to someone that's getting into sales?
I think that it's a kind of a broad spectrum on that in the equine agricultural industry. So since I'm, perceiving myself as a sales broker for the first time in hay sales, that also applies to, in the equine industry, shoeing or, providing equine therapy to anything. You have to build a book of business and relationships to get to have success, and that takes time. And you have to understand that it takes a lot of time, sometimes 6 months or a year, of providing a good service, a good product, and being persistent and developing a good relationship with the people that you want to work with and need to work with, regardless as if they do put you off or, get upset with you because things don't go perfect. You can't help, that sometimes. So I'd say just building the book of business and to build meaningful relationships and keep telling yourself that it's okay. It's going to take time.
Well, I will tell you, so my boss, when I first started my job at Decra in sales, he was like, you have like 16 to 18 months. Like that's how long the learning curve is for somebody new coming into this industry and into a sales position like this. And so, I had a lot of leeway through those 16 to 18 months to like figure out the job and how to do it and build those relationships and build off of relationships I already had. So I do think you're, when people feel like they're 3 months in and it's a panic and you're like, I haven't done anything. You're like, no, it's going to take a lot of time. Right.
Yeah, it does. That's been hard for me.
Yeah. I feel like in the horse business, probably in any business, it's all about who you know. But I feel like you probably came into this being like, well, I know tons of horse people. I can reach out to them. Yeah. I can, sell to people I already know. But I feel like even that is still challenging because
Well, it's hard because horse people have a tendency of being liking to stay with what they have and not accepting change. And they don't want to, they're like, well, this is working for me. I don't really want, I like, you're my friend, but I really like this. So it's hard, to get people to just accept change or to move to something different and make it work.
And sometimes I find it harder to ask my friends for things. Like, I think I'd rather go to like a complete stranger and just be like, oh, do you need to buy something? Because, when you have those relationships with your friends, you're like, well, I don't want them to feel obligated, but, it would be nice if they were supporting me.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's almost higher stakes if you have a pre-existing relationship with someone, because then you feel much more pressure to do a good job for them and that nothing can go wrong in the deal, So it's it's easier, I think, to call complete strangers, like you said, Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely. You put the pressure on yourself that you want it to be perfect for this person that you know. And I have a couple of friends who have changed companies or positions within the pharmaceutical industry, and they've struggled when they've gone back to their contacts and people that they considered friends and they had developed relationships with, when that person didn't support the product or the position that they were in or the company that they worked for. And, finding that was a struggle. And I have to say, even when I moved from Blue Chip to Majestic View Farm, like I thought that I would be able to have friends' horses and people would trust me, and it would be, like I had a big position at Blue Chip and then I was a general manager, and I thought, okay, it'll be easy for me to get business. And it was a struggle because people were happy where they were at or with the system they had going, and they didn't want to change. And I was like, wow, I thought these guys were my friends, and it was a little lonely. I feel like.
Oh man, I bet.
So.
And Shayla, just going back to something you said earlier about, you had to put out a lot of cold calls, but maybe the response wasn't there. And I don't know if this is like a symptom of the pandemic, but do you feel like people just don't bother with communication anymore? Like they don't call back, they don't answer emails. Like you have to be that person constantly going out and being like, hey, remember me? Hey, I emailed you a week ago. Hi, here I am again. Like, I don't know. I feel like even, in my business, a lot of times, I feel like I always have to respond immediately to everything. And it's taking me a while to be like, no, you don't have to answer that email at 10 o'clock at night. You can wait until you're at your desk the next morning. But it does get frustrating when I have people that just don't even bother to answer me. And I'm wondering if you guys have had that same experience in your jobs as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest factor of that is the world is moving so fast right now, and everything is at your fingertips. If you need it, you can go on Amazon and click and have it right away. And, people have so much going on, including me, like that you skip and miss some of the most important things in your day because you are going too fast and have too much going on. So I think that, yes, some people do avoid you and don't want to respond, or, don't have the time or whatever the thing is. But I think that a lot of it is because of, like you said, the pandemic, or just the times right now is there's no communication. All of it's done on social media through text message. It's hard to get people on the phone to have an actual conversation with you, even in a restaurant. Like all these young kids, going in there and you try to talk to them, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to talk to you. And it's bleeding over, into the agricultural and Western industry pretty hard. And I think that I am grateful that a lot of these farmers are older men that, don't communicate that way. They'd rather pick up the phone and talk to you. And still some of the feed stores, they're still, in the hay sales department is what I'm talking about. There's still some of that good old boy syndrome. And I appreciate that these days.
In some ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's interesting because I always find, my business partner says this all the time, like you can get more accomplished in a 20-minute face-to-face or a 10-minute phone call than you can with 20 emails going back and forth.
Yeah. There's so much miscommunication and text message and emails and misunderstanding and emotions that get brought in that don't need to be in because they don't hear the tone of your voice. They think you're being rude, or they think you're putting them off, or whatever the case,
Right.
A good conversation in person is definitely the best, in my opinion.
Yeah. I find that if I write an email and I ask 3 questions, I'm lucky if I get one answer to the questions that I asked. It's so frustrating because I'm trying to make it easy. Like I'm putting it all in one email for you. Here are the questions I have. And they'll answer one of them and not answer the 2. And I'm like, okay, now I got to go back and ask again for these 2 questions. I find it really frustrating because I feel that's the way like I communicate best is just like boom, 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 here it is, and give me your answers. And other people just want to like expound on one question. No, that doesn't work for me. It's interesting, like, finding the different communication skills and the differences between generations as well that I'm sure you guys see.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, and Shayla, I think you would probably agree, but I think we operate on such a spectrum of people that we deal with. Like you said, we have some farmers that have a flip phone and you need to go to their farm and meet with them and hand them physical paperwork. They want you to mail them a check. They don't want anything to do with direct deposit, ACH, emails, not interested. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have your like millennial horse trainer that might text you back one word because they're so busy that they don't even have time to pick up the phone or, talk to you in person. And so it's been super interesting. And I think a really fun challenge to learn how to navigate all of those different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And I think you're better for it, of knowing those skills and how to deal with different kinds of people.
And
Absolutely.
For me, I feel like though sometimes it makes me an overthinker, right? So I send somebody a message, like a Facebook message, right? And you see that they've read it and they haven't responded. And you're just like, so is that a no? Like, is the no answer the answer? Or,
right.
Because I told you, it was no rush or not a big deal or whatever. Are you just not answering because I said no rush, And I find
never say no rush.
And I have said that.
Never say that because then they'll just never answer you.
Right. And I was like, that was my mistake. I shouldn't have said that. But, I actually do need an answer. And so, I also find it very frustrating because I'm like, well, how hard is it to just say yes, no, need more time, whatever. Like, if you read it, then why can't you respond? So I know that is a struggle. And I imagine that's a big struggle for you guys as well.
Yeah. Yes.
And Shayla, you mentioned, you have equine background. Can you talk a little bit about it and like what skills you think from that equine background helped you become a good salesperson?
I'm going to be honest with you. Nothing. I think the sales background is actually helping me be a better equine person.
Oh, interesting.
Because I grew up raising my own horses. My family did. And so I followed into those footsteps. And I love horses and have a very deep emotional connection with them. And so I struggle and don't sell them. I like to collect.
Yes.
And, people always do want to buy my horses and I can't let them go because I love them too much.
Yeah.
So being in this side of things is helping me understand like kind of how the process works and not to just kind of want to hold it all for myself, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how the equine industry has helped me in other ways, I guess, would be, just communicating with people, having to train, horses and update them on things and helping them, just helping people figure out what they need and what they want to help. Like, I have a lot of people come to me about nutrition and how to take care of horses and what do I feed and what do I do to keep my horses healthy and sound. So I guess that communication and working through things with people that way has helped me in the sales department too.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Haley, you had horses in your, growing up as well. Can you talk about that and kind of that transition and what you brought along with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I'm constantly finding myself in this job relating ways that I like fix situations in sales or just ways that I look at my job back to my experience with horses. And I'm constantly, using analogies of how I work with young horses or my experience showing or catch riding or whatever to this job as well. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the mental control that you need both in either catch riding or working with young horses or whatever, and in sales. Just in that if you get upset, you've lost. If you're putting the first ride on a young horse and you're nervous or frustrated or, you've got other things going on in your mind, you've already defeated yourself. It's guaranteed to not go well. And so I think having the ability to kind of exude confidence and calmness, even if that's not what you're actually feeling, is so important with horses, but also with sales. If you're making a difficult phone call or dealing with conflict or whatever it is, if you can be on that phone call and just be completely even keeled and calm in the face of a man who's yelling at you or, an upset customer, whatever, then I think your chances of success are much higher. And so I constantly find myself going back to that, where the kind of the mental process that I use to make myself calm, to go in the show ring or to ride a young horse is the same as what I go through if I know I'm going to have to make a difficult phone call.
That's cool. And Haley, you talked about, people being upset or dealing with that. How do you cope with the rejection that inevitably comes with sales?
I would say I relate this back to horses also, just in terms of especially showing for this question. I think that really sets you up to learn how to deal with rejection, especially if you start riding or showing at a young age. If you have a bad ride in the show pen and you have to go back in and show later, if you don't learn how to kind of take your ego out of the equation, brush yourself off, go back in with a clean slate, then it's very easy to be kind of self-defeating. And so I think the same principle applies to dealing with rejection in a sales related position where, you're going to have phone calls that go badly where you get rejected, sometimes very thoroughly, sometimes in a way that might be insulting to you or whatever it may be. And you have to just be able to brush yourself off and come back into the next phone call with a positive attitude, with a clean slate, and just be able to go back at it as though that previous phone call never even happened.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely a skill you have to work at, though, I find. I don't think that comes easily to most people.
Oh, no. And often I'll have to sort of do the same thing that I would with my horse. So if I go in the show pen and I have a bad ride, say I go in a reining class and we drag a lead and blow through a stop and run out of whatever might happen, especially when you're showing young horses. You sometimes have to just then go work on something that you're good at. So, I might have a disaster in the show pen, and then I might just go out and work on some like lateral movement in the warm-up pen, or, just walk, even just let us both take a breather, do something that we're good at, get both of our confidence back up, and then go back in. So I've used that in this job too, where if I have a really terrible phone call, I might go take my dog for a walk, or I might, I might do some research and work on an article for the Aidenbrook blog. I might just completely go off and do something that I know I'm good at, that I know will build my confidence back up before I go back and make another phone call, just so that I know I can come back in having given myself like a hard reset.
Right.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I really like that.
And Shayla, is there a way that you cope with rejection as well?
Kind of same as Haley said, all that was great. I'll go outside and I'll clean stalls if I need a moment. I'll go do that. But there's all through life, the older you get, the more you realize that rejection comes in all forms and it's constant. And when it comes to your job and everything, you have to understand and know that it's a business. It's not personal. And keep telling yourself that, take that moment, because rejection sucks and it can piss you off. But you just, like I always tell myself, this is just business. It's fine. There's a lot of people out there. I can make more calls. Right. We'll move on. And maybe then, later revisit when they have a fresh, mindset, or maybe you caught the person at a bad time, or they were busy or pissed off at somebody else and took it out on you, So that's kind of the ways that I look at it.
Yeah.
And I think I might have mentioned this in a previous podcast, but I have a friend who gives talks, and her mom was an actress, and she took some acting classes, and she often, when she was in sales, would use that, like that she would get into a character, and then that's how she didn't take things personally. Yeah. And actually I met somebody recently who was like really great at sales, and I was admiring his sales skills and how he approached people, and come to find out he also was an actor and a comedian. And so he had that ability to kind of like separate, like if people gave him a dirty look or just walked by his booth, or, they didn't engage, he was just like, it's fine. Like it didn't affect him. Me, I'd be like devastated. I'm like, oh my God, they hated me. And it's not like, it's not me. It's, maybe the situation or the product or something. And so I think it being able to like separate that so you don't take it personally is kind of important. And when you're trying to cope with the rejection aspect of sales.
Yeah, right.
So I want you guys to peel back the hood a little bit on the jobs that you do in day to day, maybe give our listeners a little bit of an inside look of what hay sales brokers look like and the difficulties that you have day to day. So Haley, if you can kind of start and let us know what difficulties you have, and maybe even how you kind of navigate through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of my biggest difficulties, so being in the San Luis Valley in Colorado, I work with a lot of our vendors out here. So we are in the largest alpine valley in the world. A ton of hay is grown out here. A lot of it ships into Texas. A lot of it ships into the East Coast market, down into Florida and whatnot. And so a big part of my job is finding new hay, maintaining our relationships with our existing farmers out here. I'll go out to look at hay. I'll go take videos when they're doing first cutting. I'll go pull tests on stacks so that we have a good nutritional profile for new hay. And so in working with a lot of these farmers, which as Shayla said, are mostly older men, something that I've struggled with a little bit is that I don't feel always as though they take me seriously on our first meeting. So I've had a lot of farmers tell me, oh, you remind me of my daughter or my granddaughter, which is sweet, but not really the reaction that I'm hoping for, coming in as a businesswoman saying, hey, I'd like to buy your hay. And so I think how I've combated this is just coming in and having a really good idea of the local market and how this hay fits in it, and just being confident that I have that knowledge, and that even if someone is not inclined to take me seriously based on my age or my appearance or whatever, that they're going to have to take me seriously based on my expertise and the service that I can provide them.
Yeah, that's a really great way to come back is to be knowledgeable and be an expert at something, right? And Shayla, how about for you? Can you kind of tell us, what difficulties you have and how you navigate through them in your day-to-day part of your job?
Dealing with hay and growing hay and, buying and selling it has a lot to do with the weather. So, throughout the seasons, each day you have difficulties of, like, through the winter, trucks not getting into farms to pick up hay. So you have delays. Then you have messed up customers, which creates more phone calls, which keeps you stagnant on, growing your business, your book of business. Those things, truckers, having to deal with them. I've had a few just not show up or decide they weren't going to do it. Those things, rejection on, hay that you send in. I had to deal with for months a load of straw that got rejected, and the customer wanted me to move it, and I tried and tried and tried. When we were very clear on what it was, and going in there and everything, and he still wanted it, so I booked it, and then when he got it, he didn't want it, and those are day-to-day things that take up a lot of your time, and you need lots of stall cleaning or dog walking.
Yeah. Let's just agree that logistics, like trucking and stuff, is a nightmare for just about everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
For everybody. It's hard. Yeah.
I know I ship pallets of fluids to different locations, and oh man, the number of times I've gotten calls and the trucking company has changed something on the BOL. They called the wrong person. They, delivered to the wrong location. Yeah. So I feel you on that.
Or you send a fully tarped, you want it to be fully tarped, and it shows up with two tarps, one kind of in the middle on the front, and then a big space, and one maybe over the back a little bit. And you're like, whoa, how is that fully tarped?
Yeah.
We have different interpretations of full. Yeah. And especially, I think you mentioned the weather and how, it
affects growing, cutting.
Yeah, definitely.
Shipping,
the whole process of
it. I think
it.
it's our biggest obstacle.
Wow.
For sure. And
it's like, you can't, I mean, a lot of times that is the excuse why something isn't there for a customer, but do they really, are they saying,
or it shows up and it's pouring rain and they're mad because they're having to unload a truck in pouring rain and it's getting their product wet. I mean, like, you can be sympathetic all day and really truly understand that that's a frustration, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. That's hard.
So
for sure. And do you, Shayla, find it hard to be like the middlewoman between all of that, like between the farmer and selling it to a customer?
I think there's 50-50 on that. There's definitely a lot of challenges, but it's also helpful to have more players in the game and more resources to get things figured out. So kind of both ends.
Yeah. Okay. And Haley, what about you? Like, would your job be easier if all you had to do was just find farmers and not have to find the buyers for the product?
I struggled with this question, and I think Shayla really hit the nail on the head, where in some ways, yes, but I also think that having access to both ends of these deals is really helpful for kind of everyone involved. I'll go back to an example like from the San Luis Valley, where last year we got a ton of rain. Our monsoon season came early, and our second cutting for most of the farmers just didn't come out the quality that they were hoping. A lot of them already had that hay committed to dairies that they've worked with for years and years, and it got rained on and it wasn't going to be dairy quality hay. And so because we already had a network of feedlots that just wanted grinder quality hay that could be a little hot or a little moldy or caramelized in the center, we were able to bring that product to market for them in a way that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to had we not had that market of customers pre-existing. So I think, the resources that we have, because we're working with both the farmers and the customers, helps us to provide a really valuable service that, even though it comes with challenges, has been really interesting to navigate, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think, like, what do those relationships look like? Are they, like, I feel like in the horse business, we tend to get maybe a lot closer with clients because we share that love of horses, and like you get to know people better. And whereas, probably in some businesses it's purely transactional. Like, do you feel that you do have those great relationships on both sides of it? And Haley, you can go first.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. And there's such a spectrum, again, of people, of kind of the depth of relationships that people want with their hay broker. So I have some, I think especially my horse customers want to call and just talk to me about the new paint color they're putting on their barn, or that their horse is lame again, and all of the issues that surround that. And they just want to sort of make conversation with me, which I'm more than happy to do. And I can share my experiences as well, and that's a great way to develop a better relationship with someone and just build the trust there. And then, a lot of my dairy and feedlot customers, it is purely transactional. So I think that's been a really fun challenge as well to, still build relationships and deepen those relationships with my customers that do tend to be more purely transactional, because they are so important, while also keeping the customers who just want to call and chat, keeping those conversations productive, just because everyone is so busy. So it's been, learning how to kind of walk that line of needing to deepen relationships and also needing to keep conversations productive has been a skill that I'm definitely still working on developing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Same here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it. I mean, I wouldn't think about that, but I think that's like a good piece of advice for everybody in business, right? Because a lot of businesses do have relationships and transactional, but keeping those great relationships to where it's productive would be important. I mean, like, how many times do you see where riding instructors are chatting up to somebody while they're in the ring because it's their buddy and their friends and it's a good client, and they're just chatting away when they have somebody else, something else going on?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be useful to be like, what, how productive is this? Like, can we keep it to what needs to get done now and maybe find another time to socialize?
Specifically in, hay sales and stuff, and the job I'm working is, I kind of feel like with my vendors, they want to chat and have more of a friendship conversation, more so like the farmers and stuff, than I would if I called a feed store, because, they're busy. They're just wanting to get their order put in, click here. I want it to show up this day, done. Or they'll want to just text, I need this now. But I do find that, that would be over the phone. Now, I have not really gone and visited farmers like Haley, so I don't know if she has the same experience I do. But over the phone, they really want to chat, and they're really good about the market, talking and educating you on how it all works, even how freight works. Like, I've learned a lot through talking to the couple of farmers that I do have on my list, and building that relationship, and, kind of playing into and learning, because I don't know, but just like, they want to talk to me because I'll sit there and listen to them about how to do things and try to take their advice on how to bring a truck into their place and what works and what doesn't. And that's all about building a relationship. And then, like with the feed stores, going in, you'll get a completely different response than just them taking orders over the phone. You go in and they'll sit there and want to talk to you about life, So I don't know. Relationships are funny. I'm still working on them too.
Well, I think that you guys kind of both touched a little bit on this, but can we dive in a little deeper into like what it's like being a woman working in agriculture? Shayla, you can start.
I have worked amongst men my entire life, whether it's been training horses, flying helicopters, or now hay sales. The saying actions speak louder than words is huge. You'll go in there, like Haley said earlier, and they don't take you seriously, especially if you're a tall blonde. They really don't. I don't look smart. No, I'm just kidding. But no, you go in and they just kind of like, oh, great, and then I just make sure I'm good at what I do, and I just do my job and show them, and actions speak louder than words. And it's always worked for me in that way. Yes, it can be frustrating, but because especially in the aviation industry, I worked in an area where there was several companies, and one company in particular would not hire women. They refused to fly, but they had to legally. So they would hire the front desk girls, and that's how they would hire their amount of women. But they would not, and I still don't think they hire women to fly. So I've dealt with that stuff in being in the man's industry and stuff. And I do find that when you call farmers, and I don't know if Haley feels the same way, but when they hear a woman on the phone, they're just kind of like, and you have to like sit there and just kind of have a conversation with them and tell them about like what you're about and everything, and kind of build that up to kind of get their attention, and not in any funny way, but you almost have to, and it goes with any man. I don't know if this is good to say, but you kind of have to stroke their ego and make them feel like it's their idea. And then you can get a long ways with that.
Well, my mother-in-law always says that I should go in the back door with my husband, but like that's not my personality. So that's where the conflicts arise, because I'm just gonna hit it straight between the eyes, to be honest with you.
I know.
But if you make it, I know it's my idea, and that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I understand that is probably that would be a very difficult skill for me to have.
Yeah, it is. I definitely had to learn it. And flying helicopters, you do a lot of check rides to, on paper, keep your skills on paper, and that you are actually doing recurrent training and stuff. And you have to, when you get in with that instructor pilot, it's not about how you fly, it's about how they fly. And you go in there and you do what they want to do. You get through the check ride, and then you go about doing your own business. And that has helped me, be successful in a man's industry as well. Is, learning that and not being like, no, like that isn't right. That will get me killed out there. I'm not going to do that. Nope. You just do it the way they want to do it. And then you go back to doing it the safe way, and that's the reality of like aviation side of things. Yeah.
And Haley, how about what's it like working? You mentioned it before, but is there anything else that you want to add to being a woman in agriculture?
Yeah, I think on a more positive note too, I think it's a really great, increasingly great community to be involved in. And there are so many women out there that are breaking new ground in agriculture. And I think that's more visible nowadays with, so much access to information and social media, and women who now have a voice to be able to tell their story, about their role in agriculture and the ways that they're, thriving in a world that was previously and maybe still so male dominated. There's an Instagram account, I think it's called Women in Ranching, that I follow, that really touches on a lot of those stories. So that's been a really interesting thing to kind of follow as I've gotten more into the agriculture industry. But yeah, I completely agree with Shayla as well, that it's sometimes easier and more effective to not argue with men who don't want to take you seriously on the basis of, you can't just not listen to me because I'm a woman, or, to kind of approach it face on like that you just have to let your knowledge speak for itself. And if they don't want to listen to you as a market expert at that point, then that's on them and it's their loss.
Yeah. What other opportunities do you see out there for women in agriculture? Haley, you can start.
Okay. I would say, based on my own personal experience, that I think your opportunities are kind of only limited by your own experiences and the things that you're looking for. So prior to being recruited for this job, I had no idea that working remotely as a hay sales broker was even a remote possibility. I didn't know that was a career option at all. I came from the editing and publishing industry with an equine background, obviously, as well. And I was actually visiting family in Florida over the winter, working for a horse trainer. And Steve Lamb, who's the vice president of Aidenbrook, was a client of this horse trainer and approached me to ask if I would be interested in this job. So this wasn't really something that I actively sought out or thought that I had an adequate background for necessarily. And yet here I am, and I'm thoroughly enjoying this work. And it's just something that I would have no idea, 2 years ago, that this was even a remote possibility. So I think just kind of keeping all of your options open, following whatever your passions are. And I think, that in itself will open up new opportunities for you that you might not know existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Shayla, do you see any other opportunities for women in agriculture?
Yeah, I second everything Haley said. And then, I have friends in marketing that have one in particular. She's amazing. She, started, helped the Cowboy magazine get going. And then she ended up going on and helping all these big, the PBR. She got that rolling in the marketing wise and got it really rolling big and helped them get going. Then she moved on to the American and helped them get that marketed and going. And now she's working for a Smarty. It's a steer rope and dummy franchise that it's just huge, and she's marketing for that. So anything within that, and as well as, I've got another friend that's in the NRCS. She has created maps from scratch of large areas and knows grasslands and helps ranchers all throughout Wyoming manage their land to help it, produce and grow and be profitable for them. So, there is so many opportunities in agriculture for women, and I have so many friends that are very successful in it. It's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. I think, this is a recurring theme in a lot of our guests, is that, people didn't realize they could make a living from this, whatever their job is,
Yeah.
And, so many people come into the industry thinking they want to be a rider or a trainer and realizing, either they don't want to do it, they don't have the constitution for it, they can't handle the stress of it, whatever it may be, and kind of turning to these other opportunities and finding that they love them just as much, and it's providing either a better career for them, giving them time to have a family or time to have other hobbies or travel, all those things that they might not have had if they had just stayed with the horses full time. So I think it's really cool to see, all of these different aspects and really pointing it out to people, especially if we're looking at kids who are in equine studies programs in colleges and saying, all of these skills that you learn about the horse can be transferred to such a huge variety of careers. So it's cool to hear that you guys have been able to do that as well and still keep your hand in the horses and be riding and do that. I always said, halfway through college, I think it was, right, Connor, where I was like, this professional career is not going to work out, but maybe I should have a marketing degree so that I can have a job in order to pay for the horses that I want to ride.
Yeah.
And, kind of further to Jen's question, what would you like to maybe see change in the agriculture industry? Is there something that you've found that could be improved, Shayla?
That's a hard question. You don't want to talk politics, but of course it's the government and all the regulations they're throwing throughout the entire industry, farming and raising cattle and everything wise. And, it's pretty scary because they could definitely shut it down. That's definitely something I would like to see change. But other than that, I don't know.
I agree with Shayla. And I also think that there's still a big barrier to entry for newcomers to the agriculture industry. So it'd be nice to see that change a little bit and just open up more to people that aren't, generational ranchers or that are sort of new, new to it or weren't as deeply involved as the people who, you're working with think you ought to be maybe in order to be taken seriously. So I think that would just be nice to see it become a more friendly industry and welcoming industry to newcomers.
I think I think we need to get back to agriculture a little bit. Honestly, I think we've kind of grown away from it in that sustainability and just, animals, horses, all of it.
Open land.
Yes. And
well, people don't know where
Yes.
they don't know where their food comes from or how it's raised, and they think it's abuse and education, I guess. There needs to be more education in it, huh?
Yeah, I feel like that's probably why farming is a little bit as a dying breed because, and I know I've heard the conversations about, well, once I'm done farming, I'm not doing hay anymore because my kids don't want to be in it because we've educated them the opposite way instead of, the importance of farming and ranching. Everybody thinks, oh, well, if I go out and get a better job, like I don't want to be stuck on the farm. I mean, even myself, I didn't want to be stuck racing horses my whole life. So I went out and figured out something different, and that's reflecting in even like the standardbred industry. It's not growing. The people are dying off. And I feel like I hear those conversations about ranchers as well. So, I know for me, when I was thinking about that question, I was like, I would just really like to see it kind of come back in and be part of education and understanding.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a good point.
I know this is a little bit of a random question, but have you seen, due to either, weather or climate change or the way the industry is of people taking land that used to be used for something else and then being able to grow hay on it and be able to, change what they have on their farm and adapt to the changing circumstances that they have?
I would say out west, definitely. I don't know that I'm so much seeing land that was used for other things being turned into farmland, but I think I have been seeing farmland adapted to changing environmental conditions. So water is a big, big concern throughout the West. Colorado, Arizona, California have been in a pretty historic drought for several years now. And so especially in the San Luis Valley, our aquifer is getting lower by the year. We're seeing more harsh water restrictions imposed on farmers. And so a lot of them, we're seeing them switch to crops like triticale as opposed to alfalfa just because it's not quite so water intensive. It requires less water to grow. It's a little bit easier to manage, with the water restrictions that we're dealing with. So I think farmers definitely are adapting to new conditions, and there is new technology coming out to make irrigation more sustainable and get more done with less water. So I think that I would say the waterfront is what I've seen the most innovation in and change in as far as farming goes out here.
That's interesting.
Haley, now I know you have an extensive equine background, but one of the cool things that I thought you did was you were a wrangler and a guide for elk hunts. So what did you learn from that experience? That's pretty wild. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 of my uncles are the guide and camp cook, respectively, for an outfitting business. We do horseback guided elk hunts in the backcountry in Colorado, and we hunt in areas that are so remote that you're not allowed motor vehicles. And so everything is done on horseback. If we get an elk, we quarter it, pack it out on horseback. There's no phone signal most of the time where we're at. So it's very remote. And it can be, I think, intimidating to newcomers just because it's truly you and your horse and you're out in the middle of nowhere and you've got to figure it out. You can't really call anyone for help. You can't, I guess maybe now that I know Shayla through this job, I can call her and have her bring the search and rescue helicopter out if needed. But I think that has been a very cool and confidence building thing to have done for me, just because, you have to really rely on yourself and on your horse when you're out in the backcountry. And as the wrangler, a lot of my job is, so I typically, a day with that job, I'll get up at 3 a.m, feed and saddle the horses. We ride out at 4 to get where we're trying to go before the sun rises, when the elk start moving. And then a lot of times I'll run back to camp to, shuffle around pack horses or go get more horses if someone gets an elk that we need to pack out. And, then we ride back into camp at 9 o'clock at night. I feed and unsaddle the horses, and we do it all again the next day. And it's, a week-long hunt. So it can be pretty physically intense. We often ride and walk upwards of 20 miles a day. So it's just a lot of miles, a lot of kind of physical exhaustion. But at the end of the day, it's also a customer service job where you're having to keep the hunters happy, keep everyone positive, and a lot of them don't come in with any riding experience. And so it's a lot of like, hey, your saddle's shifting again. You need to straighten it back out, because there is, again, that element of you're in the backcountry and you have to take care of yourself. And so, if you roll your saddle off the side of the horse and break a rib, it becomes such a bigger deal than it would be if you just rolled off your horse in your arena at home. And so the stakes are just elevated on everything. So it's been definitely a lesson in confidence and being careful and just trusting in yourself and your abilities and your horse's abilities.
That's wild. How many people usually go on a hunt?
We have our main camp, and we typically take 1 or 2 hunters at a time. And then we'll also set up a more remote drop camp. So that'll be for hunters that don't want to be fully guided. We'll pack everything into their camp, have it completely ready for them. And then they're on their own. Unless they get an elk, then we come pack it out for them.
Wow. That's cool.
And speaking of helping people who have broken things and hurt themselves, Shayla, you were a medevac helicopter pilot, which sounds really cool. How did you kind of get into that to begin with?
Well, I used to train horses back when I was in high school and kind of early 20s, but I always wanted to fly. And so one of my friends actually got me into helicopters. I flew airplanes for a little bit and found that they were boring. So I decided to fly helicopters. He finally convinced me, and then I was hooked. So I ended up, after, flying tours and everything, ended up in the medevac field. And it's amazing. Like, the flying is so fun and so cool. Day or night, you get called out. I worked up in Farmington, New Mexico, which is, in the middle of the Rockies. We flew up through some of the biggest mountain ranges in the middle of the night, where if you use NBGs, so if you flip them up, you literally can't see. It's like a pitch black room with no windows. So it's definitely, it was a lot of fun. It taught me a lot of how to keep your cool, for sure. You're navigating and trying to find coordinates in people that are hurt in the middle of the night. And sometimes the coordinates are wrong or given to you improperly. That could put you 15 minutes away. You've based your fuel off of everything because you have to meet a certain amount of weight, and you have to make it back to the hospital you're going to, or a fuel stop. So, there's a lot to it. So you definitely want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you pull pitch and head that way. So
sales is super easy now.
I was going to say, this is a much less stressful life, right?
It is. Yeah.
Although I feel like you might be an adrenaline junkie.
I think so. Yeah. It's definitely I was like, well, it's a little more stressful, but it's, I love it. So yeah.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. Definitely, this job is amazing. I get to work from home and talk to people and be there for my kid when he gets off school. And that's something that, the aviation industry didn't give me. So that's why I decided to, put that on hold for a while. So I really appreciate this job.
That's awesome. Well, It's such a pleasure talking to you both and hearing more about what you do. And at the end of each episode, we ask the same 4 questions to our guests, and Connor starts with the first.
All right. So, Haley, I'm going to start with you. What is one action that women can take to make a big difference in their lives?
I would say just go for whatever opportunities come up that are related to your passions, even if they're not directly related to the career that you're currently in.
I like that. And Shayla?
I think being confident in yourself and what you know, and being independent. I'm not saying entirely independent and not having anybody, but being able to be on your own and knowing that you can do that will give you a high level of confidence in yourself. And then you just, exert that to everybody else. So.
And Shayla, what's the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
I make sure I stay positive. I think that's huge for me. If I start, the more negative thoughts that you allow in your head, it strips you of your confidence, of your happiness, of anything. So if you can just take something and find positive in it and keep that going, that's huge.
Yeah.
For me, at least. Yeah.
And Haley, how about you? What's the best habit that keeps you motivated personally?
I would say maintaining a good work-life balance and keeping up with my hobbies outside of work. I think it's very easy to get enveloped in a position, especially like this one, and make that your entire identity and just get so wrapped up in work that you don't maintain anything else outside of that. And I think that's a really quick way that would lead to burnout. So I really try and make sure that I get everything done that I can possibly get done during my workday. And then I go do something else and force my brain to like rewire itself and just focus on other things for a while.
Yeah.
I really like Shayla's answer though, too. That's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes you better at your job. If you've got other things to focus on and you're using your brain in a different way at other parts of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of like in personal training that I'm doing right now. He's having me do this ab work, which is not traditional ab work, and you don't even know it is. But he's like, yeah, but you don't just move up and down and forward, like you move sideways too. So I think that that's the same kind of thing with your brain. If you're stretching it a different direction, it kind of helps you, overall
be stronger everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite horse movie, Haley?
It's a toss-up for me between Lonesome Dove, the classic, and The Man from Snowy River, which is a Western set in Australia. I learned to crack a bullwhip from watching that movie so many times as a child.
That's awesome. And Shayla, what's your favorite horse movie?
Return to Snowy River. 100%. That's mine. Yep.
Yeah. That's funny because we have not had that at all until the last episode. The woman was from New Zealand and that was hers as well. So that's really
that's
all the episodes. Yeah, that's great.
Oh man, it's the best. I love that movie. And I love Lonesome Dove too. But man, I could watch Return to Snowy River every day.
And Shayla, who would you recommend to be a future guest on this podcast?
Man, I have 3 people.
We'll take them.
Yep.
My grandmother and my mother, they both paved the way for women in the Western industry. My mother was one of the first people that worked in a feedlot, and one of the first women that a rancher made her head honcho to operate a huge ranch. My grandmother did amazing things. Her stories are incredible, and she is an incredible woman of what she has done in the Western industry. Those 2 for sure. And then one of my best friends, Clarice, I mentioned her earlier. She is up in Wyoming and she works for NRCS, and she is a brilliant mind and has a lot of knowledge in that field. She would be really cool to talk to.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll have to get your grandma's number.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And Haley, who would you recommend?
I have 2. So first, I'm going to say Sandy Collier. So she is a national rein cow horse legend. She was one of the first women pro riders to really make her way. She's in the Hall of Fame. And she, I think, entered into that industry at a time when it kind of was the good old boys club and just really, really paved her way. She also she's a realtor. I think she might also be a pilot. Maybe don't quote me on that. But yeah, she's just done all kinds of things. She started out doing 3-day eventing, but she's just a complete legend. And then also Kristen Kovach Bentley. So she was the managing editor for horsenation.com for a while. She's heavily involved in the Retired Racehorse Project, both on the thoroughbred and standardbred fronts. And she also is a rancher in Jamestown, New York. And she was my high school riding coach for a while and coached for Alfred University.
Nice.
Cool. Well, I love those suggestions.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure talking to you and learning more.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This was so fun.
Thanks, ladies.
It was really interesting talking to Shayla and Haley. I think because of our contacts, we often get people in the English riding industry. So I thought it was really cool to not only talk to them about their experience in sales and in the agriculture industry, but also, knowing their background is more on the Western side and how, that has helped them as well.
Yeah, I liked a lot of the points that they made, especially on the sales and talking about rejection and how they handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that Haley had some really good points in and translating like from how she looks at it, doing young horses into her sales position and using some of that. I think that sometimes we get so wrapped in our horse stuff and we don't think about the outside world and how it can apply. But I know I've said this before, like a lot of my skills that I have for sales and getting my job have really transferred over. And I think sometimes people, if you're looking to make a transition into a different career, you can use those skills to your advantage. And, people, I have a friend who is a bartender currently, and she wants to kind of maybe do something else. She groomed racehorses for years, and she kind of wants to expand a career. And I was like, look at all the things that you did with horses and traveling around the country and organizing things. And, you need to take those skills and put it into your resume so that you can translate that into another job if you want to go into sales. And even if it's like alcohol beverages, wine. I know that people travel around the country and they sell champagne. So she was like, wow, I didn't even think about those things and those skills. And I'm like, they totally transfer. And I think Haley kind of brought that home,
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I think, if you've got someone who's worked really hard in a barn for years, they are one of the best employees you can have because, they're dedicated and they if you give them a job where they have a 9 to 5 hours, how much they appreciate having normal work hours as opposed to working in the barn. I think there's so many skills that can translate out of the barn and into, what we would call a more corporate job. And I think a lot of, managers and bosses can appreciate those skills once they understand, especially if they're horse people themselves, they understand the dedication and the hard work, and what goes into so many of those positions working with horses.
Yeah, and sales can be so tough. So I think that actually it's really good for equestrians because we're so resilient that, you are able to find ways to cope with the rejection. You are able to find ways to develop relationships and make connections and, take those skills into your sales role. So the other thing, I just found it so interesting because like Haley was talking about, she never expected this to be a career that she would go into. And it's one of those things where it's thinking outside the box, which I love. It's not being a lawyer or a doctor or it's not a cookie cutter type of job. It's thinking outside the box and putting the skills and passions that you have into a job. And, and Shayla too, she's got all this background in the cutting horses and now she's able to take her knowledge and help develop her relationships from that. And it's not so standard. It's different. And I just like us bringing that to our listeners that they can, might spark something inside somebody else to think outside the box.
Yeah, for sure. I love those ideas and you never know where it's going to lead. And, how what you're doing now could help you do something else in the future. So just keeping your mind open and welcoming, the possibility of opportunity, I think is important.
Yeah, I think that was a really great point that both of them kind of made too, was, be open to the opportunity and take it, when it comes. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was
great
really,
to talk to them.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. And, so it's a really unique job, but I've got to run today. So you're going to find the links to today's guests and the show notes at www.eqbusinesswomen.com. Equestrian B2B is out twice a month on the 1st and the 15th.
You can find out more at eqbusinesswomen.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Find Equestrian B2B wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review.
You can have all 20 plus shows of the Horse Radio Network with you wherever you go with their free app for iPhone and Android. Go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network. Now, go make those sales.